Today I'd like to take a look at chapter 26 of the book of Deuteronomy. In this book, Moses is preparing the people for eventual entry into the Promised Land. And in the previous chapters in the book, we've been taking a look at some of the laws that Moses has been sharing with the people as they ratified this covenant, this sacred agreement with God. In chapter 26, they talk about making an offering of the first fruits of the land and dedicating that offering to the Lord, and also recalling the works of God in bringing the people out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. So the offering was to remember what they had been given. And when you think about it, the people had been given so much by God. They had been given their freedom from slavery in Egypt. They'd been given the bread to sustain them, the quail to sustain them, the water to sustain them on their journey. And now they were getting ready to enter into the Promised Land. And this land that was described as a land flowing with milk and honey. So the idea was make an offering to the Lord. And this initial feast of offering seemed to be combined in Jewish celebrations with the feast of Passover. And the idea was, as the Passover commemorated the covenant, commemorated God's presence, so the first fruits commemorate the kind of fulfillment of that as the people enter into the Promised Land. Also, tithes are set apart in the third year and are offered to the Levite, the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Very beautiful sense of caring for others we find in the Hebrew Scriptures, and in particular here in the book of Deuteronomy. The idea was that, yes, there's offerings that are made to the Lord, but also very important is that you make offerings to those who are most in need. And the four categories were the traditional ones in the Hebrew Scriptures. The categories of the orphan, the widow, and the importance of also helping the alien. These three are mentioned over and over again, and as well as certain offerings that are made to a fourth category, that would be the Levites, who would be the priests. But very important was taking care of those that were in need, the sense of care for others. The covenant is made, and if the people keep all the commandments of God, God will be faithful to the people, and the people will be sacred to the Lord. So the idea of the fulfillment of the covenant was twofold. God made a promise to the people. God would keep his promise. The people on their part would keep their promise. And this would be the coming together of the covenant. And a beautiful phrase here in the book of Deuteronomy. The people will be made sacred to the Lord. So a real sense that these people are special. They are sacred. They are involved in this beautiful relationship, this intimate relationship with their God. Then we journey into chapter 27 of the book of Deuteronomy, and they talk about crossing over the Jordan into the Promised Land. And the idea was when they did that, they would set up some large stones, and they would coat the large stones with plaster and write on them all the commandments of the Lord. So the idea was that, don't forget those commandments. The commandments were given to you on your journey to the Promised Land. Then you get into the Promised Land, you might get so distracted by other things that you might forget the commandments. So just to make sure that you don't forget the commandments, God says, you enter in, get two large stones, put plaster on the large stones, and then write the commandments there so that the commandments will be front and center. Wherever you go, you can focus on the commandments. You won't forget them. And of course, very difficult because there were a lot of commandments, as we've seen in the book of Deuteronomy. Commandments about different dietary laws, commandments about marriage, commandments about farming, commandments about justice and how to have penalties for certain crimes. So all of these laws, they could be forgotten. So writing them down was extremely important for the people. And those stones were to be set up on Mount Ebal. So that would be the idea that the stones would be there, and they would be there always. The people would know the commandments, they could reference them, and be aware of the commandments. And being aware of the commandments helps also to remember the covenant, this covenant relationship with the people. Then after they set up the commandments, the next step is they should build an altar to the Lord, and the altar should be made of stone. But very interestingly, these stones would be stones that no iron has touched. So pure stones. Get the stones together, make an altar, and on that altar you could offer your sacrifice. And the first sacrifice will be offered on the altar, will be a holocaust to God, to thank God that finally, after this journey through the desert, guess what? We are in the promised land. Yay, we're feeling good about that. You should also offer peace offerings and eat them. So again, peace offerings, that there will be peace in the land, very important. And when you offer these peace offerings, you partake in them. So you offer them, but it's a communal sense of offering, and you partake in the offering, you partake in the peace offering. And the phrase that is used, you are to make merry before the Lord. So, and it's an interesting phrase, because when the people in the desert were worshiping the golden calf, the idea was that they were making merry. It wasn't before the Lord, though. They were making merry on their own. But this is now to make merry before the Lord. So again, a sense of joy. They're in this promised land. They're partaking of the peace offering. It is a joyful occasion. And then blessings were given on Mount Gerizim from Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. Then the curses on Mount Ebal from Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. So the tribes are split up, and some of them are giving blessings, others are giving curses, and we'll get into some of the blessings and curses. The curses were carved or a molten idol, dishonoring father or mother, moving your neighbor's landmarks, misleading a blind man was one of the curses, violating the rights of an alien, widow, or orphan, having relations with your father's wife, having relations with an animal, having relations with your sister or half-sister, having relations with your mother-in-law, a lot of them having to deal with sexuality, slaying your neighbor in secret, accepting payment for slaying an innocent man, and failing to fulfill any provisions of the law. These were the curses. So these were the actions that would lead you away from God. Basically, in all of them, you're violating the law, you're violating the covenant agreement, you're sort of turning your back on God. And God has given you blessings of the land, blessings of family, blessings of community, this land that is going to be flowing with milk and honey. So when you do these other actions, you bring curses upon yourself and upon your family.